living room, and he could hear soft beeping sounds coming from his bedroom. He walked to the bedroom door and looked inside. Yuna was sitting at his desk with his work tablet in her hands. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced speed, scrolling through files and documents. The pale blue glow from the tablet reflected off her blue skin, making her look ghostly in the dim room. Her silver eyes were completely focused on the screen, scanning information faster than any human could read. She didn't notice Teeman standing in the doorway. Teeman cleared his throat. Yuna's head snapped up, and for just a second, he saw something in her expression that looked like fear or panic. But it vanished immediately, replaced by her usual calm smile. She set the tablet down gently and stood up, smoothing her uniform. Teeman, see, you're home early. I was just dusting your desk and accidentally activated your tablet. I hope I didn't disturb anything important. Her explanation sounded reasonable. Her voice was steady and apologetic. But Teeman had seen her fingers moving across that screen. That wasn't dusting. That was searching, reading, maybe even copying. He forced himself to smile back and told her not to worry about it. These things happen. Yuna bowed and quickly finished her work before leaving for the evening. After she left, Teeman checked his tablet carefully. Everything seemed normal. His files were all there. Nothing appeared to be missing or changed. He ran a diagnostic check, but found no unusual activity. Maybe he had imagined the whole thing. Maybe she really had just accidentally activated the screen while dusting. But something in his gut told him otherwise. Something was wrong, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, Teeman lay awake in his clean bed in his spotless apartment, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Yuna standing at the window for 10 minutes. He thought about her questions about the station layout. He thought about her fingers flying across his tablet screen. Each incident alone meant nothing. But together, they formed a pattern he couldn't quite see yet. He decided he would start paying closer attention. He would watch his maid as carefully as she seemed to be watching everything else. Ein started watching Yuna more carefully, but she gave him no obvious reasons to suspect her. She arrived on time every morning, cleaned efficiently, and prepared his meals exactly as he liked them. She was the perfect housekeeper, which somehow made Teeman even more suspicious. Perfect things always had flaws if you looked close enough. He just needed to find hers. During lunch at work 3 days later, Teeman mentioned his concerns to Do-yeon. They sat in the station's main food court, surrounded by hundreds of other workers eating and talking. Do-yeon was eating noodles and barely looked up when Teeman explained about finding Yuna with his tablet. When Teeman finished, Do-yeon laughed so hard he almost choked on his food. You think your maid is a spy? Seriously? Who would she be spying for? The dust bunnies under your couch? Do-yeon wiped tears from his eyes. Teeman, you need to relax. You've been working too hard. These Valerians are professionals. They come here to work and send money back to their families. That's it. There's no conspiracy. Teeman wanted to believe his friend. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe the long work hours were making him see problems that didn't exist. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, he made a decision. He would investigate properly, using facts and evidence instead of gut feelings. If he was wrong, at least he would know for sure and could stop worrying. The station had security cameras in all the public hallways. Residents could access footage from cameras near their own apartments through the station's security portal. Teeman had never bothered to look at the footage before. He had never needed to. But now he logged into the portal and started reviewing the recordings from outside his apartment door. He watched Yuna arrive each morning at 8 o'clock, carrying her small supply bag. He watched her leave each evening around 6 o'clock, the same bag over her shoulder dot, but then he noticed something interesting. Every 3 days, Yuna left his apartment around noon and didn't return for exactly 1 hour. The security footage showed her walking down the hallway toward the elevators. Tiemann assumed she was taking her lunch break or buying supplies for his apartment. That seemed normal enough. But curiosity made him dig deeper. He accessed his company's administrative tools to check the station's public records. Every business and service depot on the station was registered and listed by level. He searched for cleaning supply stores and domestic service shops. The main supply depot that serviced domestic workers was located on level 8, near the commercial district. Tiemann lived on level 14. The elevators had tracking systems that recorded which floors they stopped at for maintenance purposes. It took Tiemann 2 hours of searching through system logs, but he finally found what he was looking for. Every 3 days, when Yuna left his apartment at noon, she took the elevator down. But she didn't go to level 8, where the supply depot was located. Instead, the elevator logs showed she went to level 4 and stayed there for approximately 18 minutes before returning. Then she went to level 8 for about 10 minutes, probably to buy actual supplies as an excuse, before coming back to his apartment. Level 4 was a maintenance level. It housed the station's critical systems, power generators, life support controls, and communication arrays. Only authorized personnel were supposed to access that level. Regular residents and workers had no reason to go there. So why was Yuna visiting level 4 every 3 days? And how was she getting past the security checkpoints that should have blocked her? Tiemann spent the next 2 days gathering more information. He used his company access codes, which gave him higher clearance than regular residents, to check the security logs for level 4. What he found made his blood run cold. Yuna's identification badge showed her entering and exiting level 4 during those same time periods. But there were no security alerts. No flags for unauthorized access. The system treated her presence there as completely normal and allowed. Someone had given Yuna clearance to access restricted areas. Either she had official permission from station security, which seemed unlikely for a domestic worker, or someone had modified the security system to allow her through. Both possibilities worried Tiemann deeply. If she had official permission, that meant people in authority knew what she was doing. If she had hacked the system, that meant she had skills and resources far beyond what a simple housekeeper should possess. Tiemann checked what specific area of VUL level 4 Yuna was accessing. The logs showed she spent her time near the Quantum Communications Array, the massive system that connected New Sol Station to Earth and other human colonies. All official messages, data transfers, military communications, and corporate reports went through that array. It was one of the most sensitive locations on the entire station. And Yuna was visiting it every 3 days like clockwork. He needed to see for himself. Tiemann took a sick day from work, something he rarely did. He told his supervisor he had a stomach problem and needed to rest. Then he waited in the hallway near the elevators on his level. At exactly noon, Yuna emerged from his apartment carrying her supply bag. She walked past him without seeming to notice him, standing there reading his phone. He waited 30 seconds, then followed her. Yuna took the elevator down just as the logs had shown. Tiemann took the next elevator and went to level 4. When the doors opened, he stepped into a dimly lit corridor filled with the hum of machinery. Signs on the walls warned that this area was restricted to authorized personnel only. Tiemann's company clearance allowed him to be here, but he still felt nervous. He wasn't supposed to be here during work hours without a specific maintenance request. He walked quietly through the corridors, following the signs toward the communications array. The hallway opened into a larger room filled with servers and equipment. In the corner, partially hidden behind a tall server rack, Tiemann saw Yuna. She stood in front of a control panel, her fingers moving across a holographic interface that floated in the air. She was typing commands and reading data streams that scrolled past faster than Tiemann could follow. Her silver eyes reflected the blue light from the screens. She looked nothing like a confused housekeeper who had accidentally wandered into a restricted area. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Timon's heart pounded in his chest. He pulled out his phone and took several pictures of Yuna at the control panel. The camera made a soft clicking sound. Yuna froze. She turned slowly and looked directly at him. For a long moment, neither of them moved or spoke. Her silver eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're more observant than most humans," Yuna said quietly. Her voice had changed. It no longer carried the polite, cheerful tone she used in his apartment. Now she sounded serious and calculating. "That's dangerous, Timon. What are you doing here?" Timon asked. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "Why are you accessing the communications array?" Yuna didn't answer. She touched something on her wrist, and the holographic interface disappeared. She walked toward him slowly, and Timon felt his muscles tense. He had no idea if Valerians were stronger than humans. He had no idea what Yuna might do to protect whatever secret she was hiding. Timon Park stared at the pile of dirty dishes in his kitchen sink and felt exhaustion settle into his bones. 12 hours at the mining company office, staring at extraction reports and profit margins, had drained every bit of energy from his body. He was 28 years old and living alone on New Sol Station, a massive colony orbiting a star so far from Earth that the journey took 3 months even with the fastest ships. His apartment was small, just 2 rooms and a bathroom, but it was his own space in the crowded station where 50,000 humans lived and worked. The dishes could wait another day. They had been waiting for 3 days already. What difference would one more make? Timon collapsed onto his couch and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to the same thought that had been bothering him for weeks. He needed help. He couldn't keep living like this, with dirty clothes piling up in corners and expired food containers covering his counter. His mother would be horrified if she could see how he lived now. The next morning at work, Timon's supervisor, Doyoung, mentioned something during their team meeting. The company had partnered with the Galactic Labor Exchange to offer subsidized domestic services to employees. Alien workers from peaceful species were available for housekeeping, cooking, and general assistance. The cost would be taken directly from their paychecks, just a small amount each month. Doyan said he had already signed up, and his Valerian housekeeper was excellent. Never missed a day, always on time, kept everything spotless. Timon filled out the application form during his lunch break. He felt slightly guilty, like he was admitting defeat somehow. Back on Earth, his grandmother had managed her household well into her 80s without any help. But his grandmother hadn't worked 12-hour shifts in a mining station office. She hadn't lived alone in space, millions of kilometers from family. Times were different now, Timon told himself. There was no shame in accepting help when it was offered. The approval came through in 2 days. His assigned domestic worker would arrive on Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. Her name was Yuna, species Valerian, age 26 in human years. The profile picture showed a humanoid female with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. Her file said she spoke Korean fluently and had 3 years of experience in domestic service on human stations. Timon felt nervous as Tuesday approached, unsure what to expect from living with an alien, even one who would only come during the day. Yuna arrived exactly at 8 o'clock on Tuesday. She was shorter than Timon expected, barely reaching his shoulder, but her posture was perfectly straight. She wore a simple gray uniform and carried a small bag with her supplies. Her blue skin had a slight shimmer to it under the apartment lights, and her silver eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the apartment. She bowed slightly when she introduced herself, her Korean pronunciation perfect and clear. "Good morning, Timon C." I am Yuna. I will take care of your home. Please show me where you keep your cleaning supplies, and tell me if there are any areas you want me to avoid." Teeman showed her around the small apartment, feeling embarrassed by the mess. Yuna didn't react to the dirty dishes or the clothes on the floor. She simply nodded and asked practical questions. Where did he keep the laundry detergent? Did he have any food allergies? What time did he usually wake up and leave for work? Her voice was calm and professional, never showing any judgment about the state of his living space. By the time Teeman returned from work that evening, his apartment had transformed. The dishes were clean and put away. The floor had been vacuumed and mopped. His clothes were washed, dried, and folded neatly on his bed. The bathroom sparkled. Even his refrigerator had been organized, with expired items thrown away and everything else arranged by type. A simple dinner waited for him on the counter with reheating instructions written in neat Korean characters. The days that followed fell into an easy routine. Yuna arrived at 8 each morning, right after Teeman left for work. She cleaned, cooked, and organized throughout the day, leaving before he returned home in the evening. Sometimes he saw her briefly in the morning when he was running late. She was always polite, always efficient, always maintaining a professional distance. Teeman found himself relaxing for the first time in months. Coming home to a clean apartment and a hot meal made the long work hours feel more bearable. But in the second week, Teeman began to notice small things that didn't quite fit. On Wednesday morning, he woke up early and found Yuna standing by his living room window, not cleaning or organizing, just standing and looking out at the station's central plaza. She stood there for almost 10 minutes without moving, her silver eyes focused on something far below. When she finally noticed him watching, she smiled and explained she was just admiring the view. Humans built such interesting structures, she said. On Friday, Yuna asked him questions while preparing dinner. She wanted to know about the station layout, which levels had the main services, where the administrative offices were located. She framed the questions as casual conversation, saying she wanted to explore the station on her days off. Teeman answered without thinking much about it. The questions seemed innocent enough. Lots of newcomers to the station wanted to know their way around. But the following Tuesday night changed everything. Teeman had come home early because of a system error at work that shut down the computers. He entered his apartment quietly, not wanting to startle Yuna if she was still there. The lights were on in the but she walked past him without making any threatening moves. She stopped at the doorway and looked back at him. You should forget what you saw here. Go back to your apartment. Continue your normal life. This doesn't concern you. She paused, and something that might have been regret crossed her face. I liked working for you. You were kind to me. I'm sorry it had to end this way. Then she was gone, disappearing down the corridor before Teeman could react. He stood there for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. His hands were shaking. He looked at the photos on his phone to make sure they were real and not something he had imagined. The pictures clearly showed Yuna at the control panel, surrounded by holographic screens filled with data. Teeman went back to his apartment and waited. Yuna didn't return that day or any day after. He checked the station records and found that her residential registration had been terminated. According to the official database, Yuna had left New Sol Station on a transport ship bound for Valrian space. But Teeman knew that couldn't be true. The next transport wasn't scheduled to leave for another week. She couldn't have gotten off the station that quickly, which meant Yuna was still here somewhere, hiding. And if she was still here, she was. Still doing whatever she had been doing at that communications array. Teeman looked at the photos on his phone again. He needed to figure out what Yuna had been accessing and why. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed help from someone he could trust, someone with technical skills who could understand what those data streams meant. He needed his sister. Hannah Park worked in the technical division of New Seoul Station, 3 levels below where her brother lived. She was 25 years old and had always been smarter than Teeman, at least when it came to computers and networks. She could make systems do things that seemed like magic to people who didn't understand code. When Teeman called and asked her to come to his apartment immediately, she heard the stress in his voice and agreed without asking questions. She arrived. An hour later, still wearing her work uniform with the station's technical division badge clipped to her collar, Teeman let her in and locked the door behind her. He had checked his apartment for any devices or cameras Yuna might have left behind, but he found nothing. Still, he felt safer with the door locked. He showed Hannah the photos on his phone and explained everything from the beginning. The standing at the window, the questions about the station layout, finding Yuna with his work tablet, the visits to level 4 every 3 days. Hannah studied the photos carefully, zooming in on the holographic screens visible in the background. Her expression grew more serious with each image she examined. When she finished, she looked at her brother with worried eyes. "This is bad, Teeman, really bad. Do you know what she was accessing? That's why I called you. I thought you might be able to tell from the photos." Hannah sat down at his desk and transferred the photos to his computer. She enhanced the images, sharpening the blurry text on the holographic screens until it became readable. Then she went very quiet. Teeman watched his sister's face turn pale as she read the data visible in the photos. After several long minutes, she looked up at him. She was accessing the outgoing transmission logs. These screens show records of every data package sent from this station to Earth and other colonies over the past 6 months. Military deployment reports, mining survey data, colony expansion plans, corporate financial records, everything that goes through our quantum communications array. Hannah pointed at one of the screens. And this shows she was copying the data to an external device. She wasn't just reading these files. She was stealing them. Teeman felt sick. He sat down heavily on his couch. Why would a Valerian housekeeper want that information? She's not a housekeeper, brother. Or if she is, that's just her cover. She's a spy. And if she's accessing our communications array, she's probably not the only one. They could have people on every human station and colony, all of them gathering information. Hannah stood up and started pacing. "We need to report this to station security immediately." "No, wait." Teeman grabbed her arm. "What if security already knows? What if they're the ones who gave her clearance to access level 4? Her badge showed no security alerts when she entered. Someone in authority had to approve that." Hannah stopped pacing. She understood what her brother meant. If the conspiracy went high enough, reporting it to station security might just alert the wrong people. They needed proof, lots of it, before they could take this to anyone. They needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. How many spies were there? What were they planning to do with the information? Who was behind this? "Can you access the communications array remotely?" Teeman asked. "Can you check what kind of data has been copied without physically going to level 4? Hannah thought about it. "Maybe. I have administrative access to most station systems because of my job. But the communications array has extra security protocols. I'll need time to work around them without triggering any alerts." She looked at her brother seriously. "If I do this and get caught, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse. Are you sure this is worth the risk? Someone is stealing information about humanity's military and colonies. If that information is being used to plan something against us, we need to know." "Yes, it's worth the risk." Hannah nodded. She took Teeman's computer and began working. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing commands faster than he could follow. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. She muttered to herself while she worked, talking through the technical problems she was solving. Teeman made coffee and watched his sister work her magic dot. It took 4 hours. 4 long hours of Hana breaking through security layers, bypassing authentication systems, and covering her digital tracks. But finally, she got through to the communications array's main database. What they found there confirmed their worst fears and added new ones they hadn't even considered. The array had been compromised for at least 8 months, far longer than Yuna had been working for Teeman. During that time, someone had copied massive amounts of data, terabytes of information about human colonies, military positions, resource locations, and strategic plans. All of it had been transmitted in encrypted bursts to a location outside human space. The destination coordinates didn't match any known colony or station, but worse than the data theft was what Hana found in the access logs. Yuna wasn't the only one visiting the communications array. There were 17 other identification badges that showed regular access to Level 4 over the past 8 months. Hana cross-referenced those badges with station personnel records. All 17 belonged to Valrian domestic workers employed through the Galactic Labor Exchange. All 17 worked for humans in positions that gave them access to sensitive areas or important people. Corporate executives, military officers, station administrators, government officials. It's not just this station, Hana said quietly. She had accessed the broader network connecting New Sol Station to other human colonies. I'm seeing similar patterns at 13 other stations in 5 planetary colonies. The same thing is happening everywhere. Valrian domestic workers with unauthorized access to communication systems. All of them copying and transmitting data. Teeman felt cold. This wasn't random espionage or simple information gathering. This was a coordinated operation spanning the entire human sphere of influence. The Valrians had systematically infiltrated human society through their domestic service workers. They had spent months, maybe years, gathering intelligence about humanity's military capabilities, resources, and expansion plans. The question that burned in Teeman's mind was why? What were the Valrians planning to do with all that information? Hana managed to decrypt one of the data files that had been transmitted off-station. It was a strategic assessment written in Valrian military code. Hana's translation program struggled with the technical terminology, but the general meaning was clear enough. The document evaluated human defensive capabilities across 3 sectors. It identified weaknesses in patrol patterns, gaps in sensor coverage, and underdefended colonies that would be vulnerable to attack. The document was marked with Valrian military designations and classification codes. "They're going to attack us," Teeman said. His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "All this information gathering, it's preparation for war." "Maybe not war," Hana replied, though she sounded unsure. "But definitely something aggressive. They're mapping our defenses and finding our weak points. That's what you do before a military operation." She saved copies of everything they had found to multiple encrypted storage devices. "We need to get this information to someone who can actually do something about it. Someone high enough in authority that they can't be part of the conspiracy." Teeman thought about who they could trust. His company supervisor? No, Dayan had a Valerian housekeeper too. He might be compromised without even knowing it. Station security? Too risky if the conspiracy reached that high. Then Teeman remembered something. His uncle Junho worked for Earth's Colonial Defense Force, stationed at the military headquarters on Mars. He was a senior intelligence officer with direct access to the Defense Council. If anyone could help them, it was Uncle J UNHO. But sending the information to Mars carried its own risks. If the Valrians were monitoring communications, they might intercept the message. They needed to be clever about how they transmitted the data. Hana suggested they split the information into multiple small packages and send them through different commercial channels disguised as normal business files. They would also send physical copies on data chips through 3 separate courier services. Using different names and addresses. It took another 3 hours to prepare everything. By the time they finished, it was nearly midnight. Hannah gathered the encrypted storage devices and put them in her bag. She would handle the transmission and courier arrangements from her office tomorrow morning. It would look less suspicious that way. Just another technical division employee doing routine work. Before Hannah left, she turned to her brother. You know, Yuna might come back. If she realizes we've uncovered the whole operation, she might try to stop us. You should stay at my place tonight. It's safer. Teeman shook his head. If I suddenly disappear, that might alert them that something is wrong. I'll be fine here. I'll lock the doors and keep my phone close. He tried to smile. Besides, if she wanted to hurt me, she had plenty of chances before. Hannah didn't look convinced, but she nodded and left. Teeman locked the door behind her and checked all the windows. Then he sat on his couch in the dark apartment, thinking about how his simple desire for a clean home had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened all of humanity. He thought about Yuna, who had seemed so kind and efficient. Had any of it been real? Had she felt any guilt about betraying his trust? Or was it all just part of her mission? Another tool she used to gather information. Teeman didn't sleep that night. He sat in the darkness and waited for morning, hoping that his uncle would receive the information and believe it, hoping that humanity would have time to respond to whatever the Valrians were planning, hoping that his decision to investigate instead of ignore his suspicions would make a difference. 3 days passed with no word from Uncle Junho. Teeman went to work each day and tried to act normal, but fear sat heavy in his chest. Every time someone looked at him, he wondered if they knew what he had discovered. Every Valrian he saw in the station made him tense. Hannah reported that she had successfully sent all the data packages through various channels. Now they could only wait and hope the information reached the right people. On the 4th day, Teeman received a message on his personal communicator. The sender was listed as unknown, but the text made his blood turn cold. It was an address on level 4 and a time, 8 o'clock tonight. Below that, a single sentence. Come alone if you want answers. Teeman knew it was probably a trap. Yuna had figured out that he had exposed the spy operation. This meeting was either an attempt to silence him or to find out what he knew and who he had told. The smart choice would be to ignore the message and stay safe in his apartment. But Teeman had never been good at making the smart choice when curiosity pulled at him. He needed to understand why this was happening. He needed to hear the reason from Yuna herself. He told Hannah about the message. She immediately said he shouldn't go, that it was too dangerous. But when she saw the determination in her brother's eyes, she made him promise to keep his communicator on so she could track his location. If anything went wrong, she would alert station security and send help. It wasn't much protection, but it was better than nothing. At 7:45, Teeman took the elevator down to level 4. The maintenance corridors were quiet at this hour. Most of the technical staff had gone home for the day. The hum of machinery echoed off the metal walls as he walked toward the communications array room. His footsteps sounded too loud in the empty hallway. He kept his hand on his communicator in his pocket, ready to send Hannah the emergency signal if needed. Yuna was waiting for him in the same spot where he had first seen her accessing the control panels. She stood with her back to him, looking at the servers and equipment that filled the room. She wore the same gray uniform she had worn as his housekeeper, but somehow she looked different now. More dangerous. More real. You came, she said without turning around. I wasn't sure you would. You said I could get answers. I want to know why. Why infiltrate human colonies? Why steal our information? What are your people planning? Yuna finally turned to face him. Her silver eyes reflected the blue light from the servers, making her look almost sad. Your people. You say that, like humanity, is some innocent victim in all of this. Like you haven't done anything to make other species afraid. We haven't attacked anyone. We've been peaceful with every species we've encountered. Peaceful? Yuna laughed, but there was no humor in it. You call it peaceful when you expand into every system you can reach? When you claim worlds that other species have watched for thousands of years, but never touched because we understood something you don't? Balance, restraint, the recognition that resources are finite and growth has consequences. She walked closer to him, and Timon forced himself not to back away. Yuna stopped a few meters from him and continued speaking. Her voice carried frustration and something that sounded like genuine concern. Humans have been in space for barely 200 years. In that time, you've established colonies in 14 systems and have plans to expand to 30 more within the next decade. You mine asteroids until they're depleted. You terraform planets without considering the ecosystems that already exist there. You build and grow and consume without ever asking if you should slow down. So you're spying on us because we're too successful? That's your justification? We're gathering intelligence because history has taught us what happens when aggressive species expand unchecked. We've seen it before. Species that grow too fast, take too much, push too hard into territories that other civilizations need. Sometimes they collapse under their own weight. But sometimes they become threats that the entire galaxy has to deal with. Wars that last for centuries. Billions of deaths. Entire planets destroyed. Timon felt anger rising in his chest. And you decided humans are going to become that threat? You made that judgment about an entire species based on what? That we want to explore and grow? That we don't accept limitations just because older species tell us we should? Yes, Yuna said simply. That's exactly why. Because you don't accept limitations. Because when we tried to negotiate with human leadership about slowing your expansion, your governments refused. They said humanity's growth was non-negotiable. They said space is infinite, and no one has the right to tell humans where they can and cannot go. She pulled out a small data device from her pocket and held it up. This contains everything I've transmitted over the past 8 months. Military positions, colony defenses, resource locations, trade routes. All of it has been sent to the Valerian Coalition. But the Coalition isn't just Valerians. It's 17 species who have been watching humanity's expansion with growing alarm. Species who survived the last aggressive civilization by acting before that civilization became too powerful to stop. The implication hit Timon like a physical blow. You're planning to attack us. To stop humanity's expansion by force. We were planning that, yes. A coordinated strike against your most vulnerable colonies. Enough to force humanity to the negotiating table. Enough to make your leaders understand that there are limits you need to respect, whether you want to or not. Yuna's expression grew more complex. But that plan has been abandoned. What? Why? Because of you, Timon? And people like you. Yuna gestured at the room around them. We expected that if our intelligence operation was discovered, humanity would panic. Your governments would argue among themselves. Your colonies would become paranoid and isolated. Fear would slow your expansion better than any military action could. She shook her head slowly. But that's not what happened. Instead, your sister figured out the scope of the operation in less than a day. Within 3 days, your intelligence agencies had identified and removed every single one of our operatives from positions across your colonies. Your military redeployed to cover the weaknesses we had identified. Your governments unified faster than we thought possible. And all of this started because one data analyst noticed his housekeeper was asking too many questions. Yuna walked over to the control panel and placed her hand on it. The Coalition held an emergency session 2 days ago. I was on the communication link listening to species leaders, who have existed for thousands of years, discussing what to do about humanity. Do you know what conclusion they reached? That attacking you now would be the biggest mistake we could make. That humanity's response to the discovery was so swift and coordinated that we clearly underestimated your capabilities. That a species which can organize that effectively when threatened is not one you want as an enemy. Tiemann didn't know what to say. He had expected threats or attempts to convince him to stay quiet. He had expected anything except this. So what happens now? Now, the Coalition retreats. We withdraw our operatives, close down our intelligence operations, and hope humanity doesn't decide to retaliate for what we tried to do. We're abandoning the containment plan because you humans just proved you're more dangerous when cornered than we ever imagined. Yuna looked directly at Tiemann. You should understand what that means. It means the older species of the galaxy are genuinely afraid of humanity. Not because of your weapons or your numbers, but because of how fast you adapt and respond to threats. She placed the data device on the control panel between them. This contains every piece of intelligence we gathered, including all the encrypted communications between Coalition members. Everything you need to prove what we tried to do and protect humanity from future attempts. Consider it a gift. Or maybe an apology. I don't know anymore. Why are you giving this to me? Because I liked you, Tiemann. You were kind to me, even though I was an alien working in your home. You said please and thank you. You asked about my day. You treated me like a person, not like a tool or a servant. Yuna's voice grew softer. And because I want you to understand something important. The galaxy isn't like the stories your people tell. It's not full of evil empires waiting to destroy humanity. It's full of scared old civilizations who have survived by being careful and cautious. Your species terrifies them because you're the opposite of careful. You're bold and ambitious, and you never stop pushing forward. She turned and walked toward the door. That data device also contains the Coalition's full assessment of humanity's potential as a spacefaring species. You should read it. It might help your leaders understand how you're perceived by the rest of the galaxy. Maybe it will make you more cautious. Or maybe it will just make you more confident. Either way, you deserve to know the truth. Wait, Tiemann called out. What will happen to you? Won't the Coalition punish you for giving me that information? Yuna paused in the doorway. Probably. But I'm tired of being part of a plan that treats human life as disposable. I'm tired of believing that preventing a possible future threat justifies real present harm. Let the Coalition deal with me however they want. At least I can stop pretending to be something I'm not. Then she was gone, disappearing into the maintenance corridors for the last time. Tiemann stood alone in the communications array room, holding the data device that contained everything the Coalition knew about humanity. He thought about what Yuna had said, about how the older species saw humans as reckless and dangerous, about how humanity's response to the spy operation had made them seem even more threatening. Part of him felt proud. Humanity had proven itself capable of acting quickly and decisively when threatened. But another part of him felt worried. If the older species feared humanity this much already, what would happen as humans continued to expand? How many more times would fear drive other civilizations to see humans as enemies rather than neighbors? Tiemann picked up the data device and put it in his pocket. He needed to get this to Uncle Juno as soon as possible. The information it contained could shape humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. As he walked back through the quiet maintenance corridors, Tiemann realized that his life would never be the same after tonight. He had wanted a simple solution to his messy apartment. Instead, he had stumbled into a conspiracy that revealed how humanity's rapid growth was seen as a threat by the entire galaxy. And somehow, that threat assessment had saved humanity from attack. The older species had decided that humans were too dangerous to fight. Teeman wasn't sure if that was a victory, or just a delay of the inevitable conflict. But at least it bought humanity time. Time to grow stronger. Time to prove they could be both ambitious and responsible. Time to show the galaxy that humans deserved their place among the stars. The data device Una had given Teeman contained more information than anyone had expected. When Uncle Juno received it and shared it with Earth's Colonial Defense Force, the contents sparked emergency sessions across every human government. The Coalition's intelligence files revealed not just their spy operation, but their entire strategic assessment of humanity. What they found was both flattering and deeply concerning. The Coalition had been watching humanity since humans first left Earth's solar system. They had cataloged human behavior patterns, military capabilities, technological development, and cultural tendencies. Their conclusion was clear in every document. Humans were unpredictable, aggressive, and dangerously adaptable. The Coalition assessment described humanity as a species that refused to accept failure, that treated every obstacle as a challenge to overcome rather than a limit to respect. One document called humans the species that doesn't understand the concept of staying in their lane. But the most interesting part of the Coalition's assessment was what they called the human response factor. The Coalition had run simulations of various conflicts with humanity, and every simulation showed the same pattern. In the short term, the Coalition would win through superior numbers and more advanced technology. But the simulations predicted that within 10 to 15 years, humans would adapt, develop countermeasures, and turn initial defeats into eventual victories. The Coalition analysts described it as humanity's defining characteristic, the ability to learn from losing and come back stronger. This assessment had ultimately convinced the Coalition to abandon their attack plans. Their simulations showed that even a successful strike against human colonies would likely start a conflict that humanity would eventually win through sheer determination and rapid technological advancement. The Coalition species had survived for thousands of years by being risk-averse and cautious. Starting a war with a species like humanity violated every principle that had kept them alive for so long. The human government's response to this revelation was swift and multifaceted. First, they expelled all Valrian domestic workers from human space and banned the galactic labor exchange from operating in human territories. The security risk was too great to allow potential intelligence operatives to work in sensitive positions. This caused diplomatic tension, but human leadership made it clear that trust, once broken, needed to be earned back through actions, not words. Second, humanity accelerated its military development and colony expansion. If the older species saw humans as dangerous, then humans would make sure they had the strength to back up that reputation. Defense budgets doubled. New military technologies went into rapid development. Colony ships launched at an unprecedented rate, spreading humanity across dozens of new systems within a year. The message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated or contained. Any attempt to limit human growth would only make humans push harder. But third, and perhaps most importantly, human leadership established the Office of Interspecies Relations. This new organization was tasked with understanding how humanity was perceived by other species and working to build genuine relationships based on mutual benefit rather than fear. They sent diplomatic missions to Coalition species, not to apologize or ask permission, but to discuss how humanity and the older civilizations could coexist peacefully. Some species refused to meet. Others agreed to talks, but remained suspicious. A few, surprisingly, expressed relief that humans were willing to communicate openly about the tensions. Teeman watched all of this unfold from his apartment on New Sol Station. He had become something of a celebrity in intelligence circles. The analyst who had noticed what professional security forces had missed. The civilian who had uncovered a galaxy-spanning conspiracy because his housekeeper asked suspicious questions. Various government agencies offered him jobs, promising better pay and more important work. Military intelligence wanted his observational skills. Diplomatic corps wanted his perspective on alien behavior. Even private security companies approached him with lucrative contracts, but Tiemann turned down every offer. He continued working as a data analyst for the mining company, reviewing extraction reports and profit margins just like before. The only difference was that now station security had implemented his suggestions for better monitoring of domestic workers and improved access controls for sensitive areas. His observations had led to security improvements across every human station and colony. That felt like enough contribution for someone who had just wanted a clean apartment. Hana, on the other hand, accepted a position with the Colonial Defense Force's Cybersecurity Division. Her skills in breaking through the communications array security had impressed the right people. She now worked to make sure other species couldn't hack human systems the way she had hacked them to uncover the truth. She visited Tiemann once a month, bringing him dinner and telling him stories about her new work. Though she couldn't share the classified details. 6 months after Yuna's disappearance, Tiemann received an encrypted message on his personal communicator. The message routing was complex and untraceable, bouncing through dozens of servers across multiple systems before reaching him. The sender's identity was hidden, but Tiemann knew who it was from the first line. "I told you that you were more observant than most humans." I didn't realize how much of an understatement that was. The message from Yuna was short. She explained that she had left Valerian space and was living on a neutral station, far from both human and Coalition territories. The Coalition had indeed tried to punish her for giving humanity their intelligence files, but she had escaped before they could detain her. She was now considered a traitor by her own people, but she didn't regret her choice. She wrote that watching humanity's response to the discovery had convinced her that the Coalition's assessment was wrong. In one critical way, the Coalition sees humanity is dangerous because you refuse to accept limits. But I think they misunderstand what that really means. You don't refuse limits because you're reckless or aggressive. You refuse limits because you genuinely believe that growth and exploration are fundamental rights, not privileges that need permission. You think every species should have the freedom to reach as far as they can, to try to be better than they were yesterday. That's not dangerous. That's hopeful. And hope is something the older species lost a long time ago. The message ended with a single question. Do you think humans will ever slow down? Will you ever reach a point where you say, "This is enough? We don't need to go further"? Tiemann thought about the question for a long time before responding. He typed his answer carefully, knowing that this might be the last communication he ever had with Yuna. No, we won't stop. Not because we can't, but because stopping isn't in our nature. Humans survived ice ages by migrating to warmer lands. We survived plagues by developing medicine. We survived wars by building peace. Every time someone told us something was impossible, we worked until it became possible. That's what we do. That's what makes us human. But I hope we can learn to grow without making other species afraid. I hope we can be ambitious without being threatening. Maybe that's the real challenge for humanity now. Not proving we can expand, but proving we can do it in a way that doesn't make the galaxy see us as enemies. He sent the message and never received a response. Tiemann didn't know if Yuna ever got his reply, or if she chose not to answer. But sometimes he imagined her reading his words in whatever neutral station she called home now, maybe nodding in agreement, maybe shaking her head at human optimism. Either way, he hoped she was safe. Despite everything she had done, despite the betrayal and the conspiracy, he couldn't quite bring himself to hate her. She had been doing what she thought was right, just like he had been. Life on New Sol Station slowly returned to normal, though normal was now different than before. More security checkpoints, more restrictions on alien visitors, more awareness that humanity's rapid expansion had consequences beyond just logistics and resources. The station's residents talked about the spy conspiracy for a few months before other news took over their attention. That was how things worked. Even galaxy-changing events eventually faded into background noise as people focused on their daily lives. Tiemann still lived alone in his small apartment. He cleaned his own dishes now, did his own laundry, cooked his own meals. He didn't mind the extra work. It gave him time to think. He thought about Yuna's questions about human nature. He thought about the Coalition's fear of humanity's refusal to accept limits. He thought about what kind of galaxy humanity was building through its rapid expansion and whether future generations would thank them or curse them for it. One evening, while washing dishes and looking out his window at the station's central plaza far below, Tiemann saw Doyen's family walking together. Doyen's wife carried their young daughter, pointing at something in the distance. The little girl laughed, and the sound carried up even through the sealed windows. Tiemann smiled. That was what humanity was really about, he thought. Not weapons or territory, or proving themselves to other species. It was about families having the freedom to build lives wherever they chose. It was about children growing up with opportunities their parents never had. It was about the hope that tomorrow could be better than today, if you worked hard, enough to make it happen. Maybe that hope was what scared the older species so much. They had given up on the idea that things could be fundamentally different or better. They had settled into comfortable patterns that lasted for thousands of years without significant change. Then humans showed up, refusing to settle, refusing to accept that this was as good as things could get, always pushing for more. More knowledge, more territory, more possibilities. To species that valued stability above everything else, that kind of restless ambition must have looked like madness or aggression. But Tiemann didn't think it was either. It was just the human condition. The same drive that had pushed their ancestors to cross oceans and climb mountains and eventually leave Earth entirely. The same drive that would keep pushing humanity further into the galaxy, regardless of what older species thought about it. Not because humans wanted to threaten anyone, but because the unknown always called to them louder than the fear of what might be out there. Tiemann finished his dishes and dried his hands. He sat down at his desk and opened his work files for tomorrow. Extraction reports and profit margins. The same work he had done before Yuna arrived, before the conspiracy, before everything changed. In a way, nothing had really changed for him personally. He was still the same person doing the same job in the same apartment. But the galaxy was different now. Humanity was different. And maybe that was enough. Outside his window, New Sol Station continued its eternal orbit around a distant star. Inside the station, 50,000 humans lived their lives, unaware or unconcerned that their species had almost been attacked by a coalition of 17 older civilizations. They went to work, raised families, argued about politics, fell in love, dealt with problems big and small. They were just living, just existing, just trying to make the best of their circumstances, like every other species in the galaxy. But unlike those other species, humans were doing it while refusing to accept that their circumstances had to stay the same forever. They were doing it while planning colonies on new worlds and developing technologies that would take them even further. They were doing it with the absolute certainty that whatever challenges came next, humanity would find a way through them. Not because they were special or chosen or destined for greatness, but because giving up was never really an option. Because when you survived everything Earth had thrown at you for millions of years, a little thing like the disapproval of older species wasn't going to slow you down. Timon looked at the stars, visible through his window, and wondered what was out there waiting to be discovered. He wondered if humanity would ever find its limits, or if they would keep pushing outward forever. He wondered if the galaxy would eventually accept humanity's presence, or if fear and suspicion would continue to poison relationships with other species. He didn't have answers to any of these questions, but he knew that whatever happened, humanity would face it the same way they had always faced challenges, by refusing to believe that anything was impossible until they had tried everything they could think of to make it possible, by adapting and learning and coming back stronger from every setback, by simply existing in a way that said, without words or weapons or threats, that humanity belonged in the galaxy and no one had the right to tell them otherwise. Timon smiled and turned back to his work. Tomorrow he would wake up, go to his job, come home to his clean apartment, and do it all again. It was a simple life, an ordinary life, the kind of life billions of humans were living right now across dozens of worlds and stations. And somehow, that ordinary human stubbornness to just keep living and growing despite what anyone else thought was apparently terrifying. Enough to make an entire coalition of ancient species reconsider their plans. Maybe. Yuna had been right about humans being more dangerous when cornered, but Timon preferred to think of it differently. Humans weren't dangerous. They were just really, really difficult to stop once they decided they wanted something. And right now, what humanity wanted was a place in the galaxy. Not permission to be there. Not approval from older species. Just the simple acknowledgement that they had as much right as anyone else to explore, grow, and see how far they could go. That wasn't aggression. That was just humanity being human. And if the galaxy couldn't handle that, well, that sounded like a galaxy problem, not a human one.